Hey everyone, it's Brooke. Welcome back to my channel. I'm going to do a mid-month wrap-up because I'm finally reading enough to warrant this kind of a video. There's a lot of books here. I don't want to talk about them. The first thing I'm going to mention briefly because I feel like everyone has read this already. This is Shaun Tan's The Arrival. This is a wordless graphic novel about the immigrant experience. It's about a family. The dad who goes ahead before the family to this foreign land to escape the terrors, the horrors of where they come from. And this is one of the best things I've ever read. We read it for my book club this month, and none of them had ever heard of it. And so I'm glad to have brought this to their attention. Everyone gave it like 5 stars. Like, how can you not? I really struggle to find anything negative to say about this. If you haven't read this, if you want to help people understand the immigrant experience better, if you have anyone that you want to help teach and educate about this, what a perfect book to put into their hands, people of all ages. I mean, it's wordless. It's told in these beautiful, beautiful drawings. This took him like 4 years to make. I mean, I hope this remains like a classic forever. So that's my fullest recommendation. A book that I also loved. The first 3 are all books I really, really, really loved. So why not just start with them? I think I want to do a separate video about The Silence of the Girls by Pat Barker. This is definitely my favorite like fiction book of the year. Also, I think it's my favorite cover. I just love the blue and then the gold and then just the sweep of her dress. And then like I think it's so smart with her head being cut off. I think this is a beautiful cover. That's not what the book is about though. So this is a retelling of the Trojan War told through the eyes of Briseis. Briseis was a queen in a kingdom that the Greeks sacked on their way to Troy, and then Briseis is taken as a slave and given as a war prize to Achilles. So if you're looking for a narrative that does not treat Achilles as some great hero, this is it for you. I don't love Madeline Miller. I know a lot of people do. I know a lot of people loved Cersei this year. I did not. Something about her writing is so stoic and stilted to me that I just get really bored. I think Pat Barker was the remedy to that for me. I love her writing. I think her writing feels slightly more alive, but it's also simple and pretty stripped back. I read this so quickly, just inhaled it. Love Briseis' voice. I love that she's complicated too, because you could have someone who is completely in this terrible situation, so you empathize with them just wholeheartedly, but then to make them complicated and not perfect, I think is both challenging, risky, and super rewarding at the same time. And I think she just does such a great job with that. I think this is a book that has flaws, because I think Achilles should never have had like a POV in this book, and he does a few times. I wish that had not happened. I think that's the book's biggest weak point. And even though I see that as such a problem, I still gave this 5 stars because my enjoyment of the stuff I enjoyed was so much more than I hated that. But like I said, I think I want to give this book a little bit more attention, because I think there's some bigger idea stuff here that I want to delve into a little bit more in a separate video. But 5 stars. I love this. 3 5 stars in a row. It's weird. But also, The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. This is YA contemporary about a girl who's in high school. Her parents are Dominican immigrants. Her mom is very religious and very involved in the church. When Samara, who is our protagonist, starts to like a boy, she's sort of faced with how that's going to change her relationship to her body, her relationship to her mom, and her relationship to religion. And so this is all being written about in verse. And Elizabeth Acevedo narrates the audiobook, which is absolutely how you should read this if you're able to do so. she is a slam poet, and the way she delivers, don't speed it up. Like, listen to her, the way she does it, her rhythms, her speed. It's just so good. It's so heartrending. So smart. Absolutely. No matter, even if you don't read contemporary YA lit, like, go listen to this in audio. You won't, I just can't imagine you regretting it. I mean, it's not a long audio. It's like 3.5 hours. And it's just the way I think that teenage girls deserve to be written. So there you go. My opinions on that. I also finished the Raven Cycle series, the very first of this month, with the 4th book, The Raven King. I've talked about this in other videos. I think this is one of my favorite YA fantasy series. I think it's so different than others. I thought the ending was solid. It didn't blow my mind, but I think there are way worse ways to wrap up 4 books. So yeah, I enjoyed this. I inhaled this. I binge read this, like I said, in no time at all. And it was a very pleasant holiday over Thanksgiving. Kind of get swept away in some weird magical story. So I gave those books all between 3 and 4 stars for, you know, I guess comparison purposes. I loved Michelle Obama's memoir. Also read this on audio because I got 80 pages in this, and then sort of out of like FOMO and like listening to all these people talk about how much they were enjoying the audio, I switched the audio, and it was a grand experience to let Michelle Obama read this really lovely and well-written book about her life. I loved the parts when she was a kid. I especially loved the parts after law school when she was like getting into her career and trying to figure out what kind of adult thing she wanted to do, you know, career-wise, and what her priorities were. Is that something I've really kind of struggled with in the past decade plus? I loved her and Barack's whole relationship. They're like true OTP. I liked all the White House stuff too. I think when she starts talking about being First Lady, though, she gets less candid. So it's not quite as detailed as the other parts. And I don't know that that's a criticism. I feel like that's just kind of how she has to be right now. And so I forgive it completely. But yeah, if you have even a passing interest in Michelle Obama, I think this is worth your while. Super readable and enjoyable. And then I read one comic, and that was Motor Girl Volume 1. This is by Terry Moore, who is someone I've wanted to read for a while. I don't think a lot of people, I don't know if I've ever seen this mentioned on BookTube. So I'm reading the 2nd volume in the latter half of the month. So I have more like overall feelings at that point. But the first volume is really good. It is about a girl, or protagonist, Samantha. She's a Marine. She served several overseas tours, and I think she spent quite some time in an Iraqi prison where she was tortured. And so she, as you might imagine, is struggling a lot with that trauma and PTSD. And in that trauma, she has created this sort of imaginary coping mechanism in this gorilla who is essentially her best friend. And she lives kind of isolated out on this junkyard in the middle of the desert. And so sort of beside this really heartbreaking, exploration of trauma, you have this, the absurdity of this like Area 51, like alien story, alien invasion thing going on, which was a fun balance. And I think it works well, oddly enough. So I am excited to see how this ends. It is only 2 volumes, so it doesn't require a whole lot of investment. I will say that I love this cover and the colors on it particularly, but the black is black and white inside, and the drawings are pretty simple. But I have found this lovely so far. And then sadly, I'm going to end this with a book I DNF'd, and I'm going to try not to dwell on it too much, just list some things I didn't really love about it. And that is The Wedding Date by Jasmine Guillory. I really wanted to love this. As you know, I've been kind of exploring the romance genre this year more than I have in some recent years. And I really wanted to love this because I like books with interracial relationships, having been in one for 13 years. But pretty much none of this worked for me. So it's built on the idea that these two meet in an elevator by chance. He's attending a wedding that he doesn't want to attend alone, so he invites her along and asks her to pretend to be his girlfriend. So there's like this fake dating, fake relationship idea, but I don't think it's used in the way that I really find that trope catnip, because it's not like two people who've been kind of circling each other now all of a sudden are thrust into this, let's pretend to be dating, and then that will kind of force us to admit our feelings, which is, I think, how I like that trope to work. This is more like fake dating, except that it's just like their first date. I don't know, and I didn't really see how it was very different from a first date. And they end up like hooking up on the second night after meeting. And again, I don't really like, I'm much more a slow burn person, so that's just not my cup of tea. Obviously lots of people love this, so that is their cup of tea. This is all very personal. I think what romance you like is a very, very personal thing. I also was immediately taken out of being able to escape into the story because Alexa she's not thin. She's curvy, and she's constantly comparing her body to the bodies of the white, tall, blonde, thin women around her, and it just put me in my own head about my own body because I do that very same thing. And so I just cringed every time she was doing that. I get it because I do it. Like, it's not that it's not realistic. I just think in my romance, I don't want to do that. So I couldn't escape fully in that way. I didn't understand why the hero, Drew, was attractive beyond physically. I mean, he's a doctor, I guess, but he was such like a Dr. Douche bro, really privileged. They have a conversation where his privilege becomes clear, and I feel like the book didn't engage with that enough, and I just don't believe that this sort of smart, career-focused 30-something woman, black woman at that, would be interested in this like blandly handsome Dr. White douche bro. Like, I couldn't figure it out. He's like that guy too who's like, oh, I don't do commitments, I don't do girlfriends. It's like, no, I couldn't. There's so much miscommunication here, to the point where these two very career-driven characters in their 30s, which I appreciate, career-driven 30-somethings in a book. That's great. It's fantastic. But then they talk like they're still 20, and I've even seen people mischaracterize this as new adult. It's not, friends. This book is about 30-somethings. That's not new adult. And I think it's just because of the ways that they are communicating. It's not the ways I feel like you communicate when you're in your 30s and grown up and with jobs. I mean, she handles everything. She's the chief of staff for the mayor, and yet, I don't know. I didn't like it. It didn't work for me. There's a cyclical nature of this. Like, it's constantly, they live in different cities, so they work during the week. One of them flies to the other. They spend the weekend together having sex, going to the bathroom, eating. Repeat, repeat, repeat. About the third cycle of that is when I DNF this. Like, it's so boring. And also, if we're talking about romance, I have to talk about kind of like the sex to getting to know each other through talking balance. This is not well balanced for me. This is a lot of sex, and the sex is bland. A lot of it's fade to black, and it's like we're doing this over and over and over again. I mean, I don't even know. There's so many pages devoted to this. It feels like all the relationship is sex, and they might have an occasional small conversation in between sex. It's like, my God, it wasn't for me. So I DNF'd it about a little over halfway, so I gave it a good try. But yeah, if those things don't sound like they would bother you, lots of people have loved it, so give it a shot for sure. Just not for me. And that was my first half of December, and I'm filming this Thursday the 20th, and I have the rest of the month off except for one day. So I'm going to be reading so much, hopefully, and doing maybe some reading vlogs, and that's exciting. And I will talk to you guys soon, hopefully. Bye.